The people who hurt you rarely expect to see you again. They expect the story to end where they left you. On a cool October morning, the glass facade of the Grand Meridian Hotel reflected the pale New York sky like a mirror polished for royalty. Black SUVs lined the circular entrance. Valets stood straighter than usual. Managers checked their watches every few seconds. Even the guests seemed aware that something unusual was about to happen. Inside the lobby, beneath a chandelier that stretched 3 stories high, employees gathered in carefully organized rows. Conversations remained low and cautious. Nobody wanted to be the person caught unprepared. The hotel had been sold 3 weeks earlier. Since then, rumors had spread through every department. Some believed a luxury hospitality conglomerate had purchased the property. Others whispered about a billionaire investor from California. Nobody knew the truth. Ryan Carter adjusted his Navy management jacket and glanced toward the revolving doors. At 40 years old, he had spent nearly a decade working his way up through the hotel industry. He was respected enough to supervise operations, but not powerful enough to know what happened behind closed executive meetings. Like everyone else, he was waiting. A vice president from corporate headquarters stepped forward near the center of the lobby. His forced smile revealed tension he could not completely hide. The new owner should arrive any minute, he announced. Heads nodded. A few employees exchanged nervous looks. Ryan folded his arms and looked toward the entrance again. Ownership changes usually meant restructuring. Restructuring often meant layoffs. Nobody admitted it aloud, but everyone was calculating their future. Outside, another black SUV rolled to a smooth stop beneath the entrance canopy. The lobby instantly became quieter. One valet hurried forward. The vehicle's door opened. A woman stepped out. From where Ryan stood, details were difficult to make out through the glass. He only noticed confidence in the way she moved. No hesitation. No performance. No attempt to impress anyone. She simply walked. Beside her, an older attorney carried a leather portfolio. 2 executives followed several steps behind. The revolving doors turned slowly. The woman entered the lobby. Conversations disappeared completely. Her tailored charcoal coat fit perfectly. Her posture was calm, composed, effortless. She paused briefly beneath the chandelier while the attorney spoke quietly to her. Ryan looked away for a moment, distracted by a colleague asking a question. Then he looked back. His heartbeat stopped. Not literally, just enough to make the next breath arrive late. The woman standing beneath the chandelier was someone he had not seen in 8 years. Alicia Brooks, his ex-wife. The woman he once believed would disappear from his life forever. For a second, he convinced himself he was mistaken. The lobby lights, the distance, the shock. But then she turned slightly toward the reception desk. Ryan saw the same steady eyes, the same calm expression, the same quiet dignity he remembered from long before everything fell apart. Around him, employees waited for introductions. Nobody understood what they were witnessing. Nobody recognized the history standing silently between them. Alicia's gaze moved across the lobby. Not searching, simply observing. Then, for the briefest moment, her eyes met Ryan's. She showed no surprise, no anger, no bitterness, only recognition, the kind reserved for someone from a chapter of life already finished. Ryan felt the floor beneath him become strangely unsteady. Because in that instant he realized something impossible. Alicia had not returned to visit the hotel. She had returned because it belonged to her. A silence settled over the lobby that felt heavier than any announcement. The vice president blinked twice as though reminding himself that everyone was still waiting. Then he cleared his throat and stepped forward with a nervous smile. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "it is my honor to introduce the new owner of the Grand Meridian Hotel." Nobody moved. Alicia Brooks stood beneath the chandelier with one hand resting lightly against the strap of a leather portfolio. The golden light reflected across the polished marble floor around her. She looked neither excited nor intimidated. She looked like someone who had spent years preparing for a moment nobody else believed would ever arrive. Effective immediately, the vice president continued, "Ms. Alicia Brooks has assumed full ownership of the Grand Meridian and its affiliated properties." A quiet wave of surprise moved through the crowd. Several employees exchanged confused glances. Others tried discreetly searching their memories. The name meant nothing to most of them. To Ryan, it meant everything. His fingers tightened around the folder he was holding. 8 years disappeared in an instant. 8 years of unanswered questions. 8 years of assumptions. 8 years of believing he already knew how Alicia's story ended. Yet there she stood, surrounded by executives who treated her with obvious respect. The attorney beside her opened the portfolio and handed over several documents. Alicia accepted them with a small nod before turning her attention toward the staff. Her eyes moved across the room slowly. Housekeeping supervisors, front desk agents, event coordinators, maintenance technicians, bell staff, people who spent their days making the hotel function while guests rarely noticed their names. "Thank you for being here this morning," she said. Her voice was calm and clear. No dramatic introduction. No speech about power. "I know ownership changes create uncertainty. I understand that." Several employees visibly relaxed. Alicia continued, "I am not here to erase what works. I am here to improve what can be better." The words were simple, yet something about the way she said them felt genuine. Ryan noticed employees listening more closely now. Even managers who normally looked distracted seemed focused. Alicia spoke for only a few minutes. She mentioned employee development, long-term investment, guest experience, community partnerships. Nothing flashy, nothing designed to impress headlines. Every sentence sounded practical, deliberate, real. When she finished, polite applause filled the lobby. Then stronger applause followed. Ryan remained still. Around him, people were responding to a successful business introduction. For him, the moment felt unreal. He remembered a different Alicia, a woman, sitting at a small kitchen table late at night with stacks of unpaid bills. A woman who believed every problem could be solved if she simply worked harder. A woman he once accused of being unrealistic. He remembered signing papers. Remembered walking away convinced he was protecting his future. The attorney stepped forward and quietly guided Alicia toward a group of executives waiting near the elevators. As she passed through the lobby, employees introduced themselves. She greeted each one with the same measured attention. Nobody was rushed. Nobody was ignored. Then she stopped. Ryan realized too late that she had stopped directly in front of him. The noise of the lobby seemed to disappear. Alicia looked at the name badge attached to his jacket. Her eyes lifted again. "Mr. Carter," she said politely. Not Ryan. Not an old nickname. Just Mr. Carter. Professional. Distant. Complete. Ryan swallowed. Alicia. For a brief second, neither spoke. The years between them felt visible. Then Alicia offered a courteous smile. "It is good to see you doing well." Before Ryan could think of a response, another executive approached with questions about the afternoon schedule. Alicia nodded and turned away. Just like that. No accusation. No bitterness. No mention of the past. She continued walking toward the elevators while executives followed close behind. Ryan stood frozen beneath the chandelier. Because the most unsettling part was not that Alicia had become successful. It was that she no longer seemed to need him to understand it. That afternoon, Ryan tried to focus on work. He reviewed occupancy reports, answered emails, approved event schedules. Yet every task seemed to dissolve the moment he looked away from the screen. Across the hotel, conversations kept returning to the same subject. The new owner. Employees who had met Alicia described her as calm, professional, surprisingly approachable. Nobody spoke about luxury cars or extravagant displays of wealth. Instead, they talked about how she remembered names after hearing them once, how she thanked housekeeping supervisors personally, how she spent nearly 20 minutes listening to concerns from the maintenance department. The stories unsettled Ryan more than he wanted to admit. Near sunset, the city skyline glowed beyond the executive conference room windows. Senior managers gathered around a polished walnut table waiting for the first strategic meeting under new ownership. Ryan sat near the far end, pretending to study the presentation packet in front of him. The room gradually filled with department heads. Soft conversations drifted through the air. Then the door opened. Everyone immediately stood. Alicia entered with her attorney and 2 executives. She thanked everyone for coming and took a seat at the head of the table. Not once did she look toward Ryan. The meeting began. Alicia listened far more than she spoke. Revenue forecasts appeared on large screens. Budget projections followed. Staffing concerns, vendor contracts, capital improvement plans. Ryan found himself watching her reactions. She never interrupted unnecessarily. When she asked questions, they were precise. When someone explained a problem, she focused on solutions rather than blame. After nearly an hour, One executive discussed plans for renovating several guest suites. Another proposed reducing costs by eliminating certain employee programs. Alicia remained silent until he finished. Then she folded her hands. "What is the annual savings?" she asked. The executive provided a figure. Alicia nodded. "And what is the turnover rate in the departments affected?" The room grew quieter. The executive checked his notes. The answer was higher than average. Alicia waited. Nobody spoke. Finally, she said, "People are not expenses that happen to work here. They are the reason guests return." Several managers exchanged surprised looks. The proposal disappeared from discussion. Ryan looked down at the conference table. He remembered a different conversation years ago. A tiny apartment. Late bills scattered across a counter. Alicia arguing that people mattered more than short-term numbers. Ryan insisting the world did not work that way. At the time, he believed practicality was wisdom. Looking back, he was no longer sure. The meeting ended shortly before evening. Managers gathered their materials and headed toward the door. Ryan joined them, eager to leave before awkwardness found him again. "Mr. Carter." Alicia's voice stopped him instantly. Everyone else continued walking. Within seconds, the conference room was nearly empty. Ryan turned. Alicia remained seated at the table reviewing several documents. For a moment, she did not speak. Then she closed the folder in front of her. "I reviewed employee records this morning," she said. "You have been here for 7 years." Ryan nodded. "Almost 8. Alicia acknowledged the answer with a slight nod. "Your performance evaluations are strong." The statement felt strangely formal. "Thank you," Ryan replied. Alicia stood and walked toward the windows overlooking Manhattan. The fading sunlight reflected against the glass towers outside. "You helped build a successful career here." Ryan could not tell whether she was complimenting him or simply stating a fact. Maybe it was both. Finally, she turned toward him. Her expression remained composed. "I hope you continue doing good work." That was all. No accusations. No references to the marriage. No discussion of the years between then and now. Yet somehow the restraint felt heavier than anger ever could have. Ryan managed a quiet nod. Alicia offered the same courteous smile she had given him earlier in the lobby. Then she picked up another folder and returned her attention to business. The conversation was over. As Ryan walked out of the conference room, he realized something he had been avoiding since morning. The woman he once believed needed him had become someone whose life moved forward perfectly well without him. And for the first time, he found himself wondering what had happened during those 8 missing years. That night, Ryan sat alone in his apartment overlooking the city lights. The television played quietly in the background, but he could not remember a single thing he had watched. His thoughts kept returning to Alicia's face. Not because she looked different. In many ways, she looked exactly the same. It was the calmness that unsettled him. The certainty. The absence of any need to prove herself. Around midnight, he found himself staring through the window as memories he had not visited in years slowly resurfaced. 8 years earlier, the rain had fallen steadily against the courthouse windows on the day their divorce became final. The sky had been gray. The parking lot nearly empty. Alicia stood beneath a covered walkway holding a thin folder against her chest. Ryan remembered how tired she looked. Not dramatic. Not broken. Just exhausted. Months of financial stress had drained the color from both their lives. Their small business had failed. Loans remained unpaid. Creditors called constantly. Every conversation seemed to end with another bill neither of them could afford. At first, they had faced the problems together. Then slowly, almost invisibly, they began facing them alone. Ryan convinced himself that survival required difficult choices. Practical choices. Necessary choices. The legal documents reflected those choices. Certain assets had been divided. Certain obligations had not. When the paperwork was complete, Alicia walked out carrying far more of the financial burden than anyone should have carried by themselves. Ryan remembered standing beside his car while she reviewed the final pages one last time. The wind pushed loose strands of hair across her face. She did not cry. She did not argue. She simply signed where she was told to sign. Looking back, that silence should have meant something. At the time, he interpreted it as surrender. He had been wrong. 3 weeks after the divorce, Alicia moved into a 1-bedroom apartment above a laundromat on the edge of Queens. The building was old. The hallway lights flickered. Delivery trucks rattled the windows before sunrise every morning. The apartment contained little more than a folding table, a mattress, and several cardboard boxes that doubled as furniture. Collection notices arrived almost daily. Alicia placed each envelope into a drawer beside the refrigerator. She never threw them away. She wanted to know exactly what she owed. Every dollar, every mistake, every consequence. During the day, she worked at a small front desk in a budget hotel near the airport. The pay barely covered rent. In the evenings, she picked up additional shifts serving coffee and sandwiches at a 24-hour diner. By the time she returned home, the city was usually asleep. Some nights her feet hurt so badly that climbing the final flight of stairs felt like a second job. Yet every morning she woke before sunrise and did it again. One cold November evening, Alicia sat alone at the folding table reviewing monthly expenses. The numbers refused to cooperate. After rent, utilities, transportation, and debt payments, almost nothing remained. She stared at the calculator until the screen dimmed. Then she closed her eyes. The apartment was completely silent except for the distant hum of dryers downstairs. In moments like that, many people would have searched for someone to blame. Alicia did not. She reached for a notebook instead. Across the top of a blank page, she wrote 3 words: learn, improve, rebuild. Then she began making a list of hospitality courses offered through a local community college. Outside, the city continued moving without noticing her. Inside that tiny apartment, with overdue bills stacked beside her and uncertainty waiting around every corner, the first foundation of an empire was quietly being built. The years that followed did not transform Alicia's life all at once. There was no miracle phone call, no sudden inheritance, no stranger arriving to solve her problems. Progress came quietly, measured in early mornings, long shifts, and thousands of small decisions nobody else ever saw. 2 years after moving into the apartment above the laundromat, Alicia earned a hospitality management certificate. She attended classes after work, completed assignments at diner booths during meal breaks, and studied on subway rides across the city. Many nights, she returned home carrying textbooks in one hand and groceries in the other. The debt balance decreased slowly, painfully slowly. Yet month after month, the numbers moved in the right direction. One spring afternoon, while covering a front desk shift at the airport hotel, Alicia noticed an older guest sitting alone in the lobby reviewing several folders. He looked frustrated. Papers were spread across a coffee table. A half-finished cup of coffee sat untouched beside him. Most employees walked past without paying attention. Alicia did not. During a quiet moment, she approached and politely asked whether he needed assistance. The man looked up and smiled faintly. His name was Nathan Whitmore. At the time, Alicia had no idea who he was. She only saw someone struggling with a scheduling problem involving multiple properties and a delayed conference reservation. 10 minutes later, she had reorganized the booking arrangements, contacted vendors, and resolved an issue that had been creating problems for days. Nathan watched carefully as she worked. When everything was finished, he closed the folder and studied her expression. "How long have you been managing hotels?" he asked. Alicia laughed softly. "I do not manage hotels." Nathan glanced around the lobby. "That is surprising." Alicia thanked him and returned to work. The conversation lasted less than 15 minutes. She thought little about it afterward. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived at her apartment. Inside was an invitation to interview for an assistant operations position at one of Nathan Whitmore's boutique hotels in Manhattan. Alicia stared at the letter for nearly a full minute. She had never applied, yet somehow an opportunity had found her anyway. The interview took place on a bright Monday morning. The property was elegant without being flashy. Warm lighting, polished wood, staff members who genuinely smiled at guests. During the interview, Nathan asked almost no traditional questions. Instead, he listened. He wanted to know how Alicia approached problems, how she treated employees, what she believed guests remembered most after a stay. At the end of the conversation, he leaned back in his chair. "Skills can be taught," he said. "Character is harder to teach." Alicia received the job offer that same afternoon. The position paid more than she had ever earned. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future larger than survival. The work was demanding. Expectations were high. Yet Alicia thrived. She arrived before sunrise and often left after dark. She learned every department: housekeeping, food service, guest relations, operations, financial reporting. When problems appeared, she solved them. When employees struggled, she listened. Within 18 months, she earned a promotion. Then another. Nathan noticed everything. Not because Alicia tried to impress him, because she never did. One evening after a long meeting, Nathan and Alicia stood near the rooftop terrace overlooking Manhattan. The city lights stretched for miles beneath the night sky. Nathan handed her a financial report. Most people spend years chasing titles, he said. You spend years building value. Alicia looked down at the report, then back at the skyline. She had no idea that the lesson he was about to teach her would eventually change everything. Because for the first time, someone was preparing to show her how employees earned paychecks, but owners built legacies. Over the next several years, Alicia learned that there was a difference between working inside a business and understanding how a business truly operated. Nathan never treated her like an employee being groomed for promotion. He treated her like a future partner. The lessons began quietly. After long meetings, he would hand her financial reports and ask what she saw. At first, she focused on revenue, expenses, and occupancy percentages. Nathan would nod and then ask another question. What story are the numbers telling? Slowly, Alicia began seeing patterns hidden beneath spreadsheets. She learned how one smart decision could strengthen an entire property. She learned how one careless decision could damage a company's reputation for years. Most importantly, she learned that ownership was not about control. It was about responsibility. By her 5th year with the company, Alicia had become one of the most trusted leaders in Nathan's organization. Employees sought her advice. Managers requested her involvement in difficult projects. Guests regularly mentioned her by name in reviews. Yet despite the promotions and recognition, she continued living below her means. The expensive apartment she could finally afford never appeared. The luxury car never arrived. Every month, after paying bills and clearing the last remnants of old debt, she directed money into investments. Some people celebrated raises with vacations. Alicia celebrated by purchasing assets. One winter evening, Nathan invited her to dinner at a quiet restaurant overlooking the Hudson River. Snow drifted beyond the windows while ferries crossed the dark water below. After discussing business for nearly an hour, Nathan slid a folder across the table. Alicia opened it and frowned. Inside were documents related to a small boutique hotel in Connecticut. The property was struggling. Occupancy had fallen. Ownership wanted to sell quickly. Why are you showing me this? Alicia asked. Nathan leaned back slightly. Because I think you should buy it. Alicia almost laughed. The idea sounded impossible. I am not a hotel owner. Nathan smiled. Not yet. For several seconds, she stared at the paperwork. The price was significant. Even with years of savings, the risk felt enormous. Nathan seemed to understand exactly what she was thinking. Most people wait until they feel ready, he said. By then the opportunity is usually gone. Alicia took the folder home. For 3 weeks, she reviewed every page, every expense, every projection, every risk. Then she made the decision that would alter the course of her life. She invested nearly everything she had. The following year was one of the hardest she had ever experienced. During the day, she continued managing operations. Nights and weekends were spent rebuilding the small property. She walked guest rooms personally, reviewed maintenance issues, met with staff, listened to customer complaints, solved problems one by one. There was nothing glamorous about the process. Success arrived slowly, disguised as consistency. Then the numbers began changing. Occupancy improved. Reviews improved. Revenue improved. Within 3 years, the property's value had more than doubled. Alicia reinvested the profits. Then she did it again and again. One property became 2. 2 became 4. The portfolio expanded quietly across several states. Meanwhile, life continued moving forward. Nathan remained a trusted mentor and business partner, but Alicia's success belonged to her. Every decision, every sacrifice, every long night. Back in the present, as rain tapped softly against the windows of her Manhattan office overlooking the city, Alicia reviewed a newly completed acquisition report. The document carried the name of one of the most recognizable luxury hotels in New York. She signed the final page and closed the folder. Years earlier, she had written 3 words inside a cheap notebook at a folding table above a laundromat. Learn, improve, rebuild. Looking out across the skyline, she realized something remarkable. She had done all 3, and the world was only beginning to notice. The following week, the atmosphere inside the Grand Meridian began to change. Not dramatically, not overnight. The changes appeared in small details that most guests would never notice. Maintenance requests were approved faster. Employee break rooms received upgrades that had been delayed for years. Training programs expanded. Department managers suddenly found themselves included in discussions that previously happened behind closed doors. Employees talked about it quietly during lunch breaks and shift changes. The new owner was investing in the people who kept the hotel running. Ryan noticed it too. Every morning he arrived expecting to find some flaw in the strategy, some mistake, some sign that Alicia's success was temporary. Instead, he found evidence of careful planning. The more he observed, the harder it became to dismiss what she had built. One Thursday afternoon, a rumor spread through the management offices. At first it sounded too unbelievable to be true. Then another executive confirmed it. By evening, everyone was discussing the same news. Alicia's investment group had acquired 2 additional luxury properties in Chicago and Miami during the previous quarter. The Grand Meridian was not her largest asset. It was simply one piece of a much larger portfolio. The realization settled heavily across the staff. People who had assumed she was a fortunate investor suddenly understood they were working for someone operating on an entirely different level. Ryan sat in his office, staring at the city beyond the window. He remembered the apartment above the laundromat, the collection notices, the uncertainty, the version of Alicia he thought he knew no longer existed. Or perhaps she had always been capable of this, and he had simply failed to see it. Across town, Alicia attended a meeting with investors inside a modern conference room overlooking Central Park. Nathan Whitmore sat beside her reviewing financial projections. Although mostly retired now, he remained one of her closest advisors. As the meeting concluded, Nathan glanced toward Alicia with quiet amusement. "You know," he said, "most people spend years trying to prove someone wrong." Alicia closed her notebook. "And?" Nathan smiled. "You spent those years proving yourself right." The words stayed with her long after the meeting ended. That evening she walked through the Grand Meridian alone. The lobby glowed beneath warm lighting. Guests checked in. Suitcases rolled across marble floors. Soft piano music drifted through the air. She paused near a balcony overlooking the main entrance. Years ago, she had stood behind hotel front desks hoping to earn enough money to make the next rent payment. Now she owned the building. Yet the feeling was not triumph. It was gratitude. Gratitude for every difficult morning that taught discipline, every setback that forced growth, every opportunity she had chosen to take despite fear. Downstairs, Ryan watched her from across the lobby. For days he had debated whether to speak with her honestly. Not as an employee, not as a former husband defending old decisions, simply as a person. Yet every time the opportunity appeared, he hesitated. The distance between them felt larger than the years themselves. Then something unexpected happened. A senior executive approached Ryan carrying several folders. "There is a leadership reception tomorrow evening," she said. "Ms. Brooks wants all department managers there." Ryan accepted the invitation. After the executive walked away, he opened the envelope and read the details. The event would be held in the Grand Meridian Ballroom. Attendance required. Formal attire. Ownership presentation. Strategic announcements. He looked toward the balcony again. Alicia had already disappeared from view. Somehow he sensed that tomorrow night would change something important. He just did not know that the biggest revelation was still waiting for him. The ballroom shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers as hundreds of employees, executives, and invited partners filled the room. Soft music drifted through the air while servers moved quietly between tables carrying coffee and sparkling water. Ryan adjusted his tie and scanned the crowd. Conversations echoed across the room, but beneath the polite smiles and professional greetings, anticipation was everywhere. Everyone knew Alicia planned to make a major announcement. Nobody knew exactly what it would be. At precisely 7 o'clock, the lights dimmed slightly. The conversations faded. A large screen illuminated at the front of the ballroom. Alicia stepped onto the stage without fanfare. No dramatic introduction. No oversized presentation. Just quiet confidence. She thanked everyone for attending and spent several minutes recognizing the efforts of employees across every department. Housekeepers, maintenance teams, front desk staff, event coordinators, the people who rarely stood in spotlights. The room responded with sincere applause. Then Alicia paused. Behind her, a slide appeared showing photographs of various hotel properties. New York, Miami, Chicago, Connecticut. Several executives exchanged surprised glances. Many employees were seeing the scope of the portfolio for the first time. Alicia continued speaking calmly. She explained how hospitality was never simply about buildings. It was about trust, service, consistency, human relationships. Then another slide appeared. This one displayed acquisition records and ownership structures. The ballroom grew quieter. Ryan watched the screen carefully. The numbers were staggering. Property after property, investment after investment. Years of growth that had happened completely outside his awareness. He felt as though he were looking at evidence from a life he had never known existed. A senior attorney stepped onto the stage beside Alicia carrying a folder. He opened it and addressed the audience. Many people know Ms. Brooks as the owner of the Grand Meridian. What fewer people realize is that she is also the sole controlling owner of the Whitmore Hospitality Group. A wave of surprise swept through the ballroom. Several executives straightened in their seats. Others looked toward Nathan Whitmore, who sat quietly near the front of the room. The attorney continued. 5 years ago, Mr. Whitmore began transferring ownership interests through a structured succession plan. 3 years ago, Ms. Brooks became majority owner. Today, she serves as the sole controlling shareholder of every property within the group. The room became completely silent. Even those who knew Alicia was successful had underestimated the truth. Ryan felt his chest tighten. He looked across the ballroom toward Nathan. The older man simply smiled and applauded. The mentor had never built a successor. He had built an empire builder. Alicia stepped forward again. Her expression remained calm. Success is rarely one moment, she said. Most of the time it is years of invisible work that nobody applauds. The audience listened carefully. There were times when people underestimated me. There were times when opportunities disappeared. There were times when failure seemed easier than continuing. She paused briefly. But every difficult season taught something valuable. Ryan lowered his eyes. He understood the unspoken meaning behind those words. She was not speaking to him directly. Somehow that made them hit even harder. Alicia was not exposing anyone. She was not seeking revenge. She was simply telling the truth about her journey. The audience rose into a standing ovation. Applause filled the ballroom. Some employees smiled with admiration. Others wiped away tears. Alicia accepted none of it as a victory lap. She simply stood there with the same quiet dignity she had carried all week. And as Ryan joined the applause, he finally understood the difference between the woman he had left behind and the woman standing on that stage. One had been struggling to survive. The other had learned how to thrive. Yet deep down, they were the same person. The only difference was that now the entire room could finally see her value. The applause continued long after the presentation ended. Employees gathered in small groups across the ballroom, discussing everything they had learned. Some talked about the company's future. Others talked about Alicia herself. Yet for Ryan, the noise seemed distant. He stood near the edge of the room holding an untouched glass of sparkling water while watching people congratulate the woman he once believed would never recover. Eventually, the crowd began to thin. Executives departed. Staff members returned home. The musicians packed away their instruments. The ballroom slowly emptied beneath the warm, golden glow of the chandeliers. Ryan remained where he was. Part of him knew he should leave. Another part understood that if he walked away now, he would carry unfinished words for the rest of his life. Across the room, Alicia stood speaking with Nathan Whitmore near the stage. Their conversation appeared relaxed. Familiar. Nathan eventually smiled, shook her hand, and headed toward the exit. Alicia remained behind, gathering several folders from a nearby table. For a moment, she was alone. Ryan took a slow breath and crossed the ballroom. Alicia noticed him approaching, but did not seem surprised. She simply waited. The silence between them felt different now. Not uncomfortable, just honest. Ryan stopped a few feet away. "Do you have a minute?" he asked quietly. Alicia nodded. "Of course." For several seconds, he searched for the right words. None of them seemed adequate. Finally, he looked down and laughed softly at himself. "I spent the entire week trying to figure out what I would say." Alicia listened without interruption. Ryan folded his hands. "I think I wanted some explanation for how all of this happened." He glanced around the ballroom. "But the truth is, you already explained it." Alicia remained silent. Ryan continued. "You worked for it." The words sounded simple, but saying them felt important. He looked directly at her. "I was wrong about a lot of things." No excuses followed. No attempt to rewrite history. Just a quiet acknowledgement of reality. Alicia studied him for a moment. Then she nodded. We were both different people back then. Ryan smiled sadly. Maybe. He hesitated. But I should have believed in you. The ballroom fell quiet again. Somewhere in the distance, hotel staff moved tables for the next day's events. Alicia looked toward the chandeliers overhead before returning her attention to him. Life taught me something after the divorce, she said softly. People do not always see your potential. Ryan lowered his eyes. Alicia continued. That does not mean it is not there. The words carried no bitterness. Only wisdom earned through experience. Ryan felt a weight inside him begin to settle. Not disappear. Just settle. I am glad things turned out this way for you, he said honestly. Alicia smiled. It was the first truly personal smile he had seen from her all week. Thank you. Another brief silence followed. Then Ryan asked the question that had quietly lived in his mind since the moment she walked through the hotel doors. Did you ever want revenge? Alicia looked genuinely surprised by the question. She thought for a moment before answering. No. Ryan blinked. Alicia glanced toward the windows where the lights of Manhattan stretched into the night. At first I wanted stability. Then I wanted opportunity. Then I wanted growth. She smiled faintly. After a while, I was too busy building a future to keep staring at the past. Ryan looked away. The answer somehow felt more powerful than any accusation could have been. Alicia gathered the final folder from the table. You were right about one thing all those years ago. Ryan frowned slightly. What was that? Alicia's smile widened just enough to reveal quiet confidence. I recovered. Then she turned and walked toward the ballroom doors. Not hurried. Not triumphant. Simply moving forward. Ryan watched until she disappeared beyond the hallway. For the first time, he understood that her greatest victory had never been becoming wealthy. It had never been owning hotels or earning recognition. Her greatest victory was that she no longer needed validation from the people who once underestimated her. Outside, the city shimmered beneath the night sky, while Alicia stepped into the future she had built with her own hands. She did not win him back. She won herself.